All right, well, let's get started. So thank you everybody for joining my session. My name is David Stamen, and we're going to talk today about managing vSphere with Tanzu with a custom PowerCLI module. So who am I? My name is David Stamen. I am a field solutions architect focused on virtualization and cloud solutions at Pure Storage. I was formerly a technical marketing architect at VMware focused on vSphere lifecycle. And I'm currently designated as a VMware vExpert, as well as a VMware code coach. You can find me on social media, on Twitter, as well as LinkedIn. And you can find me blogging at davidstamen.com. And you can find a lot of my sample scripts on GitHub. So today's session shouldn't go too long, but I'm going to kind of talk about how to get started, in this case with the vSphere with Tanzu module. Last year at VMworld, I kind of covered how to do this with the vCenter server appliance update, but the groundwork of everything is going to kind of just show how to actually get started and really work with PowerCLI modules, because there's really a lot of stuff that can be done. William Lamb has done a bunch of these. He's actually kind of right before I said I was going to do this session, he put one out as well. So in the long term, my goal is to merge those together, but build on and see what else from a community standpoint we can help create from a PowerCLI perspective. So for a quick agenda, this is going to be pretty much the only slide of the PowerPoint, is how do we really discover what APIs that we can use with PowerCLI? Because there's a lot of pre-built modules out there. But what if there's stuff that is currently out there that you want to be able to script that isn't available, and maybe you don't want to use any of the SOAP APIs or REST APIs or Python or the Terraforms or Ansibles out there? Once we can see what APIs are available, let's look how we can export that with PowerShell and how we can actually make it format to where it's more user readable. And then how do we actually create the modules? How do we create the functions? How do we make sure we're doing it right? The module is really two components. It's the manifest file as well as the actual module. And then really the best thing now is everything is really better when it's in the PowerShell gallery. It's super easy to maintain, super easy to publish, easy to install. You don't have to have users manually have to go out and download it from GitHub and import it. So we're really going to make that simple. So that's it from a slide perspective. So let's look at kind of what it takes. So here I am logged in to my vCenter 7 server. So since vSphere with Tanzu is a vSphere 7 and above feature, it's going to need to be on that or above. For now, I'm just SSH. And really, the one way that I first learned how to actually find what APIs I could do when I first used my vCenter appliance update module was I really looked at the data center CLI to see what API namespaces are available. So if you do DCLI plus I, it's going to be interactive. And so you can really go to a lot of these helps and find out more from there. But I know for vSphere with Tanzu that everything is under COM, VMware, vCenter, and then namespace management. And so when I did this, it kind of shows all of the components that were part of namespace management. And I knew the very first command I did is I just wanted to get information on the clusters. So if I do that, I can do namespace management clusters, and it'll tell me what are the available commands. So I can do list, I can do get, I can do set, I can rotate passwords, I can enable and disable. And so if I do a list, this will show me all the details of the namespace management cluster in this environment. So again, I said formatting is really ideal because it's not always going to be useful. So here we can see the cluster was domain C8, and a lot of the APIs will actually return the UID of the cluster, not the actual cluster name. It'll also give us details about the Kubernetes status, the configuration status, and then all of these thresholds. So we can go here and see a little bit more. Like I said, we can see all of those things. And so when I built this module, there's a few things that stood out that I thought were really important. So software sounded really important to me. The host config, the cluster compatibility was also one, size info, and available versions. So just kind of seeing what's out there and see what can be pulled. There is a supported module out there that's part of PowerCLI, but it's pretty much just information about namespaces. And I figured for now I was going to start with get and then ultimately add in a lot of sets and edits. So now that we know we want to look at the clusters in that namespace, Well, let's take a look of what that actually looks like when we dive into PowerCLI and PowerShell. So I'm going to make this a little bit larger so we can see it. So really the key here when we are looking at this is there is a CIS service, which is the equivalent of the data center CLI. And so I know that it was COM, VMware, vCenter, and then namespace management. So in this case, I've connected to my vCenters using the Connect CIS server, and there is a Connect-CI server. Don't get confused with those. And so I knew that if I did let's copy this, and nope, paste. I'm missing the and break. So I can see here all of the components that were here as part of those. So if I didn't know exactly which one it was, because things are a little bit different here in my namespace management one, it's not going to be, it's going to have an underscore, unlike in data center CLI where it wasn't. So if I do the namespace management, I can see that all the things I can see here. So again, if I want to see here, I want to see namespace management clusters. And so I was able to see here the details from here, and then we can go in and actually dive into it. So if I go here and I do put this into the API, I can do API.list, which is the equivalent of running that list in there. So from here, I can see all of that details. I can see the domain. I can see the cluster name doesn't populate. So I have found that as I go through this, there are some variables that exist, but they haven't been populated, which probably means that the APIs are still being worked on a little bit. And here I can see those Kubernetes status and config status, and then all these stats are rolled up into these underlying variables. So if we look here at the actual script, the function is very important. We create a function with the commandlet we want. Comments are definitely important, making sure you know who was created by, how to reach out to them, what it actually does, put a description, put an example, because people need to know how to actually do it. And a lot of this will be pulled from Get Help as well. And then from here is when I created these, I wanted to be able to work with multiple clusters. So what I'll do is find all the clusters that are currently connected with CIS server and pass that to a variable. And then for each server, I will cycle through and pull in the results. So in this case, I'm getting information from that CIS service, COM, VMware, vCenter, namespace management .clusters. And then I'm passing the results into this API.list. And then, like I said, formatting is very important. I don't care about help. I don't care about cluster name, and I don't care about stats in the help. So in this case, what I'm going to do is take in server and pass in the server name so I know, well, what server is this actually being reported for. I'm going to make the cluster more user-friendly. Again, as I have this commented out because it's not there yet, I'm going to make configuration status, Kubernetes status, put in CPU capacity used, memory capacity used, and storage capacity used. And then I'm going to output what that result is. And so this allows me to give the flexibility to display what I actually want to see. So what I'm going to do is, because this isn't currently published to the PowerShell gallery, I'm going to go ahead and import my module because I'm actually working on this locally. And so what I always like to do is when you import it locally, or if you're doing updates, always use the force flag. Because if you don't use force and it's already installed, it's going to not really import or any update of the commandlets that you've actually used. So from here, if I do a get workload management cluster, we can see here that in this case, my DS4 VC1 is actually running. It has ready, it's ready. We can see that, again, a lot of the APIs are there, but they may not actually have data exposed to them. So we see 0 for everything for CPU, memory, and storage capacity. And that's nothing really wrong with the script. That's just what the API currently returns. We can see the cluster. In this case, DS3 VC1 is not running vSphere with Tanzu, and so it's not going to have any outputted results. And so kind of like I said, I went through that API and realized, well, what made the most sense to me as a vSphere admin? So I kind of did, I think it's what, about 8 different commandlets. Let's run through them. So the second one would be get workload management namespace. And so what this returns is, again, details for each individual namespace for those clusters. So this one vCenter has one cluster called namespace 1. It's currently running in this cluster with this amount of CPU, memory, and storage. So that's really cool. One big thing that was out there was cluster compatibility. If you went to enable a vSphere with Tanzu cluster, it would just say that it was incompatible. And if you look at a lot of the documentation, a lot of the blogs, it says, well, go to CLI, run the cluster compatibility, and it'll tell you what happens. So if I run that here, it'll tell me that the cluster that's currently running vSphere with Tanzu is compatible. There's no incompatible reasons, and it's currently running on this server. Right now, it's looking at the incompatible server, the DS3 VC1, and sometimes this takes a moment. If it doesn't, I'll have to restart it. Again, this is always the benefit of doing a live demo. And also, if you have any questions at all, feel free to post them in the Q&A, and we'll be able to address those either while we're waiting for some of this or towards the end. So let's see if that's going to work. It's just waiting to time out. And so again, while that's waiting to run, we can actually look at a lot of these too. So we're essentially doing the very same thing. These are very easy to do. We pretty much just pull the service for that particular API namespace. In this case, it was cluster compatibility. And then we parse through the list and then find out what we wanted to actually extract from there. So let's see, PowerShell. We can do this a different way. Let's open up another window. Let's log in here. All right, and then we go documents, get PowerShell. All right, let's try to see if this looks good. Workload management, cluster compatibility. So, also could be potentially the VPN. That is also the fun time of there. So it happens. We can revert to this again for this particular example. But it is useful to be able to, let's go ahead and exit out of that and we can start a new terminal. All right. Well, we can skip that. For some reason, it's not playing nice there. So let's go ahead and open up a new PowerShell session here. So really what we have, once we get everything formatted, the next step is let's look at what it takes to actually create it. So there is what we call the PowerShell manifest file. And this is actually what contains the information for the actual module when you upload it to the PowerShell gallery. So stuff like the module version, the compatible additions, it'll create a unique UID, given the author company information, description, put in a minimum requirement. You can put in all types of details, what is actually required. So in this case, it requires PowerCLI. So I have the core module there. And then we'll actually put in the functions to export. And this is really important. because within this, that is what's actually going to cause the module to autocomplete when it's installed. If you don't include any of the functions to export, you're going to have to manually enter them, and it won't do that auto tap complete, which is what users tend to love. And so you can go out here and manually create all of this stuff. But in the README here, I actually have the information on how to create this manifest. So we're going to put in our variable, so the path to where the module is located, the module version. So I've done some updates. I want to make it 1.0.1, the author, company name, the version, tags, links to where the project is. So I have this open on GitHub. So feel free to contribute if there's anything you would like to add or edit. A link to the icon to be used in the PowerShell gallery. Description, again, required modules, and then the functions. So what I'm going to do is take in these variables here, and let's copy that. And I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And for some reason, I love how Visual Studio Code sometimes just paints the screen when you paste. And so the very cool thing with a lot of these functions and modules is the skeletons are already there. There's no need to completely recreate the wheel and do your whole stuff when it comes to updating things. A lot of the frameworks are here. William Lamb, like I said, has a bunch. There's also a Horizon module out there. So a lot of these skeletons are here. So I can see here that I had all this 1.0.1. If I look at the updated manifest file, we can see that now this was updated to 1.0.1, and that is all there. And so the next thing we need to do is actually see, well, how do we actually publish this module? And so if you actually go to the PowerShell gallery, there's a bunch of details on how to actually do this. But the very first thing you're going to have to do is create an API key. And so for this one, let's call this CodeCon. Now I'm going to have it just expire in 1 day. We're going to have allowed to push new and updated package versions. And let's just have it do all for now. And so what I'm going to actually do is create this key. And since I will be showing the key, I'm going to want to make sure that this doesn't really last long. So I'm going to go ahead and hit copy. So when I come back here, the important thing is that if we do a get module, list available, vmware.community.workload. We want to make sure that we actually have our module imported, because that is what it actually gets published as. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a publish module, pass in the name, which is vmware.community.workload management. You're going to need to pass in the NuGet API key, which we just created. And then we hit enter. And so what this is going to do is go ahead and update the module. So it normally takes, let's see, your API key. That should be fine. Actually, I think I need to re-import it since I updated the version. And then if we look at, that's still there. And again, benefits of live demos, we'll see if that works. If not, we can just delete that. Does not append. I may just need to update my API key. Okay, so for some reason it is thinking that it's not recognizing the updated version. So it's still seeing it as 1.0. And this is the community. Sometimes I just need to go ahead and remove it from that folder. So that is if we do a get module, it should hopefully. This is where it always gets. Sometimes I need to just manually copy it over. And then we'll paste that to. And again, there's also a. Let's see, so let's see if this works now. Nope, it's being stubborn. But in the end, essentially what that works is, in my case, I just have the package updated, and for some reason it's not recognizing the updated version. But from here, this is kind of where we go and get that addressed. So as we wrap up, again, I said this wasn't going to be too long. Are there any questions? Cool. Well, definitely check out my blog, davidstamen.com. I do have an example of this. I'm going to update this one a little bit more. There is some information on how to do this with the VCSA update module. So thanks for taking time and chatting with me. Thank you very much.